Assalamu alaikum. This is your host Waris Hazana. Welcome to Agahi. In today's episode, we have two fantastic guests who will be joining us from Birmingham, representing Muslim Youth Helpline, an organization that supports Muslim youth across UK. As we are all aware that there are thousands and thousands of young people who are struggling on a daily basis in terms of their mental health, the social and the mental challenges that they face on a regular basis. They need support, they need counseling, and most importantly, they need someone to listen to their problems. They need active listening. Muslim Youth Helpline is a fantastic organization that supports people. And we have the CEO with us today, Maaria Mahmood. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
And we also have with us Brother Abubakr Hussain, who is the trustee of Muslim Youth Helpline. He is also a project management professional and has a lot of experience working with youth and society in general. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Warisa. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. So let's start this show, inshallah. Sister Maaria, if you could please give a little bit of introduction about the organization Muslim Youth Helpline and what it offers.
I'd love to. So, Muslim Youth Helpline, we are an emotional support mental health helpline, and this year we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. So we've been around for 20 years and we operate throughout the UK. And what we offer, the service that we offer is we offer emotional support to vulnerable young Muslims in the UK. It started off 20 years ago, so 2001, and it started up by three 18-year-olds. And this is a lovely story because it reminds us of young people feeling the gap of support that they probably needed or their friends needed, and created this initiative. So it started 20 years ago in one of the young lads' their bedrooms. They had a very simple counselling model, and they would operate the helpline for a few hours every day. And through that, it grew. And today, we operate 4 platforms. So young people can reach us on phone, they can reach us on email, web chat, and WhatsApp. And we operate every day from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And depending on the nature of the concern or how comfortable people are, people tend to call us, or sometimes they tend to give us a few life updates via email. We've also started WhatsApp recently, so engaging with WhatsApp. And as an organisation, we're pretty. I mean, the impact we have is quite large. But as an organisation, we're pretty small, and we're not that far removed from the people that we serve, which means that we can quickly adapt to the needs of the young people and the young Muslim in the UK. And that's how our platforms really develop and evolve, really.
MashaAllah, that sounds absolutely fantastic. And I think more than ever before, people need that kind of support. People need those kind of helplines to reach out to and talk about the problems that they're facing. Brother Abu, I'm going to direct towards you. And if you have worked as a 999 call operator as well, that must have been pretty challenging and daunting in itself, listening to people and the extreme circumstances that they are exposed to. What kind of challenges people face on a daily basis? And I'm referring to young people.
Sorry, are we talking about 999 in particular, or young people?
You can also share the experiences that you had while working as an operator.
Yeah, of course. So
if you ever received any call from a young person?
Yes, yeah, of course. So when I was working in the West Midlands Ambulance Service, this was one of the things that drew me towards working in the field of mental health and working with young people. When we deal with those calls, we're dealing with people who are in an incredibly acute moment of crisis. So, for example, we would deal with people who are feeling suicidal, which is something Muslim Youth Helpline continues with, and people who are feeling completely bereft of hope. But there is a beauty within that as well, because even when someone feels hopeless, there's still something within them. There is still a little part of them which is crying out for hope. That is what compels someone to pick up 999 or to dial for Muslim Youth Helpline. So they don't know what they're looking for, but they're hoping that maybe that there is something, and that is why our work is so essential. Like in my own calls, for example, I've dealt with. I remember one young lady particularly. She was a young Muslim girl, about 15, 16, and she'd stabbed someone. Now,
Right.
she wasn't the victim, she was the perpetrator. Now, many people would look away from that. They would just shun her and shut her off from society. But is her life, does it not have value? Does it not have dignity? And is she not calling us to try to find a way to better herself as a person? And yes, the criminal justice system exists, but there is also, we have to have that level of empathy and that passion and sympathy to be able to help someone overcome the moments of crisis. So yeah,
Yes.
that's one of the many things I took away from the ambulance service, and inshallah I hope to continue with MYH.
So, were there any patterns that you noticed that most young people under the age of 18 are complaining about, or issues that are most prevalent amongst young people? Did you see any pattern, any trend that, okay, this is something that I come across on a regular basis?
Hmm. Sister Maaria, are you still on the line?
I'm
So
still
you're on the
around.
line? Could you take this one, please? I think you're better placed.
Sure. So actually, on the helpline, we collect a lot of data, and this data really helps shape our understanding of, the primary concerns of young people, and also for training purposes. Are we best placed to provide that support to young people? And what we do see is we see patterns emerging of what those concerns are on the helpline, and you can imagine some of the issues that are happening on the ground, whether that's policy based, whether that's within the educational system, or changes and reflections in the media, that does have a huge impact on young people. So, for
Yeah.
instance, at the initial first lockdown, we saw a 313% increase in calls coming into the helpline. Now, this was a reflection of people who would usually use our helpline. And on top of that, people who had never ever thought about using a helpline, but suddenly felt the need to feel some kind of connection, or something who needed support during the lockdown. And in terms of those concerns coming in, young people during exam period were struggling a lot with the uncertainty of whether, this is the initial exam period during the first lockdown, about whether exams would take place, unfairness that came of the lack of exams and the way
Yeah.
they were treated. On top of that, we had a lot of family issues arising, and so a lot of young
Yes.
people were really quite vulnerable at home, due to the increased care responsibilities of young people falling in because their loved ones were impacted by COVID. And as a community, as the Muslim community, we were greatly impacted by COVID and those stark numbers. So, young people feeling very vulnerable by the news, by the lockdown measures, and by the actual impact that they were having themselves with their community, with their loved ones. And coupled with that, we had our first Ramadan in lockdown as well. So
Yeah.
all of these small challenges accumulate and impact the young person, and those are reflected on the types of calls that we get on the helpline. So most recently, exams are over for a lot of young people, so they've got this very long, extended summer holidays, and we've seen now a
Yes.
change in the pattern of behaviour on the helpline. A lot of young people calling in about the relationship advice, trying to understand boundaries within their families and their own friendship groups and things like that. So that's a huge issue currently on the helpline, about how to navigate that world that maybe they would have neglected during exam
Yeah.
period, but now is part and parcel of their life again.
Thank you so much for that, Sister Maria. And thank you so much for joining us as well, for taking the time out. Just to remind our viewers, this is a live call-in show. So if you want to ask any questions, if you have any concerns, or if you want to give any feedback to our guests, please feel free to call in our studio number. You can also leave a message on our Facebook Hidayat TV YouTube and Facebook page. Brother Abu, you were talking about some of the calls, for example, that you received where people were thinking about attempting suicide or people
Mm-hmm.
were at the verge of ending their lives. What do you think is the reason behind that? Because we see the statistics in the UK that majority of people who practice self-harm or who would think about ending their lives and attempt suicides are under the age of 30. Why do you think that is?
Okay, yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And what I'd like to do is I want to, in a way, zoom out a little bit because what what we do is very important, but we have to recognize the broader picture of UK society, which is creating such concerns, and I think there's two levels here. First, that there is the broader picture of what is affecting young people, and then on top of that are the additional challenges, the intersectionality, shall we say, of being a young Muslim and of being predominantly BAME background. But when we look at wider young people society as a whole, that there is this one issue which we just cannot avoid, and which is the stagnation of the UK economy. That there was this time when people, and these are our parents, our forefathers, when they were growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that they lived in an era of constant economic growth. So this growth, it created it created a sense of optimism. It created a sense of hope that it was possible, for example, for a young person, and I've heard the stories, I'm sure you have, young people at the ages of 23, 24, 25, they would buy houses, they would put down a deposit, and they would buy a house effectively from their first job, and what that would do is that would give them freedom. That would give freedom. I know we're talking about young people, but they are still adults, and in a way, when we get stuck in our homes, when we're surrounded by parents and uncles and aunts and all this family, it actually takes us away from being able to forge our own paths. Now, like before I was, when I was doing some research for this interview, I just looked up some stats, and they're shocking. Like for example, in 2008, the average weekly salary was around £600. Today, like almost 15 years later, it's £585. And from that, so it stayed the same. And that is actually disguising what is happening to the Muslim population, because we are predominantly, over 70% of us, of Pakistani and Bangladeshi backgrounds, over 70% of us are in the bottom half of earnings. And we know that income inequality is rising. So if a wider society that has fallen by £20 over 15 years, it will have fallen even more for young Muslims. And this creates cycles of deprivation and poverty that is, we just cannot hide this. And we have to recognize that it is causing severe issues for young Muslims. Sorry, I can keep on going, but feel free to interrupt me.
No. What you're highlighting some really key issues here. And I'm sure a lot of people are not aware of this. There is a lot of discrimination within the society in terms of race and religion and skin color, and there are young people who are struggling on a daily basis. They're being bullied at school, for example, or they're being harassed, or they're subjected to discrimination when they apply for jobs, for example, or they're trying to fit in the local community. So these are the challenges they are subjected to on a daily basis. And they need a safe space to talk about these problems. They need people to listen to them, give them the right piece of advice, refer them to the right organizations and right professionals. And I think Muslim Youth Helpline is doing a fantastic job in doing that. So if you could elaborate more on the type of work that you do at MYH.
Yes, of course. Maaria, would you like to take this if you're there?
I'm still here.
Yes, all right, thank you.
And thank you for those kind words, Risa. And honestly, there are so many organisations out there that support young people. But the primary reason why Muslim Youth Helpline exists is that there is a need for young people to get support from a faith and culturally sensitive organisation. And that does not necessarily mean that we provide advice, whether that's faith-based or non-faith-based. But what it does mean is that we understand the lived experiences and the identities and the multiple identities that young people juggle every day, and that's young Muslims. Every individual on our helpline is Muslim, but also is trained to be culturally and faith sensitive to our approach. We are completely non-judgmental and non-directional, and that means that we create this safe space for young people to discuss any concern that they want to. It's completely anonymized, and creating that safe space allows them to sometimes speak about some of the most difficult topics that they've never spoken to anyone about because of fear of being judged, or because of the fear that they might have the right tools to discuss this topic. And also by creating that safe space, we are allowing them to articulate some of those vulnerabilities that they face. And then through our support, we don't tell them what to do, but what we do is we allow them to kind of outline some of their next options, or some of their next moves, or kind of create a plan, help create a plan for them where they're able to work through that plan. And at the end of the day, we identify that the young person is best placed to identify what is the appropriate plan for them. So we're just there to support that need. And being a faith and culturally sensitive organization, it's one of the reasons why this is very important is because mainstream organizations don't give that type of service. And so number one, it deters a lot of young Muslims to get the mental health support that they may need. And actually, if they do end up going to mainstream support services, they actually feel quite targeted because the approach isn't sensitive to their needs. And so that might put them away from getting support again. And so what happens is we're creating an even bigger gap in the mental health support for young Muslims because it isn't appropriate for themselves. A lot of young people turn to us because they've actually used these mainstream support services previously, and they've found that they've had to explain far too much even before they've started the conversation about why they are there and what support they need. They've had to kind of give a backstory to their faith or some of those mechanisms that they hold so close to them, or the fact that they live in a multi-generational household and how that impacts their schoolwork and their life and everything like that, and how interconnected we are. And all of these things, it seems quite natural to us, and where we have a level of understanding and we're willing to, even if we may not practice that cultural element in our lives, we are open to it. It's not so alien to us. But for some people, when they turn to that supposed safe space, they almost feel targeted even before they've even started. They feel that what they're trying to explain is so alien to the person that's listening, and that is quite off-putting because you want to be completely free to discuss whatever is concerning you in that safe space.
Of course,
It's very important that organizations like ourselves do exist, and we are doing it. We are this huge gap of support that actually mainstream support services should be filling.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, Brother Abu, we were talking about the challenges that young people, especially in the Muslim community, face on day-to-day basis. Like I spoke about bullying and peer pressure and discrimination, Islamophobia. All of this contributes towards mental health difficulties that young people face. And looking at the statistics, a lot of young people are suffering from one kind of, or something to do with their mental health, whether it's anxiety or low mood or some kind of phobia and low self-esteem. Like there are so many things that a child or a young person can experience as a result of what they are going through on a daily basis, whether at school or college or at work. if I ask you to give some examples that you have come across
Mm-hmm.
in our community, in our society, when it comes to teenagers, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to link this in with what Maaria has been talking about providing faith and culture-based support, because as a community, we feel we're visible, but in a very strange way, we're also an invisible minority, because addressing ourselves as Muslims is actually very complicated for our broader secular society to recognize and to deal with. So even an organization like Muslim Youth Helpline, sometimes people go, whoa, hang on a second. When we talk about ourselves as being, alhamdulillah, as confident Muslims, that can throw people off. And so we have to call upon our other identities almost to access support and help. So that is why, for example, when I was looking at statistics, I would find it much easier to find statistics on Bangladeshis, British Bangladeshis and Pakistanis, and almost have to use them as proxies for the Muslim experience. And this is what young people face a lot of the time, because they are experiencing something which has to do with their identity, but it is a double form of discrimination, because they are facing, for example, Islamophobia, but they can't
Yes.
actually tackle it as Islamophobia. They have to approach it from a different perspective. So, for example, I'm just going to go off what's been in the news recently. There have been a couple
Yeah.
of, shall we say, drivers which everyone is aware of, right? The first one is the recent conflict in Israel-Palestine, which
Yeah.
young people felt very passionately about. And young people,
Mm.
of course, being young, that sometimes we cannot express our feelings in, shall we say, a
Yeah.
secular compliant way. So there have been
Yeah.
reports of young people being suspended for simply saying Free Palestine, or young people being
Mm.
suspended because
Yeah.
they expressed their support for the Palestinian people in, shall we say, a method that was deemed inappropriate. And what that does is it actually inhibits all of us, because we see those people and they said Free Palestine in the wrong
Mm.
space, and then they think, well, hang
Yeah.
on a second, I can't say this myself. So it dampens us down, and it actually stops us from being full participants in, shall we say, in the
Yes.
UK experience. But even the way the government deals with young people is not fair. Like, if we look at the
Mm.
way Shamima Begum and her two friends that they were dealt with. These were young women who, pardon the time, but this is true. They were effectively sexually groomed, and
Yeah.
they went to Syria. They were only 14, 15 years old, and
Yeah.
we know of grooming cases in this country where those
Yes.
where girls who were groomed were rightly treated as victims, but those girls are either, as far as I'm aware, they're either dead or they've lost their citizenship. What
Yeah.
that does is it creates this feeling of second class citizenship amongst young
Mm.
people, because we have to be careful that I would like, I would like the government, I would like us to, no matter what we have done, to still be
Yeah.
considered British. Yes, get sent to prison or whatever, be treated in the criminal justice system, but not to be deprived of our citizenship, not to lose access to the support which we should be entitled to. We are full citizens of this country, and a
Mm.
lot of the time, the way we are treated, it takes away from young people feeling full participants. And there's this other case just a couple of months ago, before
Yeah.
before the Israel-Palestine conflict, which was again
Mm.
this cartoon which gets kept on being thrown in our faces, Charlie Hebdo.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
why is it that a young person in school, they are being taught their faith and being shown what is to them a blasphemous image, right?
Mm.
I have seen anti-Semitic images shown in lessons about the Holocaust, where it is entirely
Yeah.
appropriate to show them, because then we can see and appreciate the conditions that Nazi Germany created, right? And that is the right time to show something which is very hurtful, but then why aren't we shown Islamophobic cartoons in the context of Islamophobia and how Islamophobia is damaging? On the contrary, we are shown those photos, our children, young people are shown those photos about their religion, and then they have to react to it. And if they react inappropriately, then organizations like Prevent or other disciplinary measures come in. And we get faced with this constant stigmatization. It is very difficult for young people to deal with that, because they are effectively being used as pawns by broader society. And what it does is it creates these wedge issues, where as Muslims we always have to be careful as to what we say. And I would say no other people, shall we say, no other community has to really deal with that. But we do. We are there. We have to cope with it.
And I guess that's where the double standards of, freedom of speech come in, that for certain communities, they can speak anything, they can be vocal about issues that affect them. But when it comes to the Muslim community, they can't even express their feelings and sentiments about things that they're passionate about or things that matter the most. It's almost like saying that certain lives matter, but certain don't. And I think children and young people, teenagers, they are unable to kind of express themselves, but they do tend to feel emotions deeply. And I have recently come across a lot of young people who had these discussions or arguments in school related to certain issues about religion and like the Palestine issue. And they were subjected to discrimination and hate speech and bullying just because of that. So I think that if you are growing up in this kind of environment, what are the chances of that child growing up with good level of confidence and a good level of self-esteem? Because they will be suffering from social anxiety, they will be socially inhibited, they may develop fears and phobias where they feel they cannot communicate with people, they will have problems with trusting people. There's so many issues that these young people are going to experience while growing up. So if you could highlight some of the problems that you feel are quite common when a child transitions into adulthood, especially being a Muslim in the West.
That's an excellent question. Maaria, what are your thoughts here? And then I'll follow up.
Maybe we could bring in some wonderful research that MYH did in 2019. So we surveyed 16 to 30-year-old young Muslims in the UK, and we found that 32% of our respondents had suffered through suicidal thoughts. 63% had suffered from anxiety. A quarter of our respondents had identity struggles, and half of respondents went to friends for help the last time they had any issues. And then when we look at just the male population, 40% of the men that we spoke to said that they actually didn't speak to anyone when they last had an issue. And altogether, our respondents, 52% had suffered through depression. Now, these are very large statistics for a very young population. And the respondents, this data gave us. I mean, when we look at data and mental health statistics for Muslims, and I think Abubakr glanced on this previously, but mental health research in the UK is very limited when it comes to religion and when it segments religion. It's very much across class or ethnic identity, never across religious groups. But it's so important because when we look at groupings like BAME, that tells us so much. There's so much being packed in that in that grouping that it's still not fair when we look at the impact of policy on young people, or the impact of mental health policy or health policy on young people. That's why it's so important we look at it across religious groups, because this research very limited research anyway, because it's, very far and few in between. But it tells us a different story, and one that has not been told before, but one that we do need to delve in further, is the state of the Muslim youth and their mental health. And Sister Rita, you picked up a very good point there, which is clearly there has to be an impact on the young mind, but there is so little information about that. How can we support the young Muslim when there is limited data telling us about what support they need? What
Yes.
impact can be. I mean, we are the generation that are the post 9/11 generation, and the policies, the heightened policies that came after that, until this day, how did that shape our world, and how did that shape our future, and the decisions that we did make as young people.
Yeah. And go on, brother.
So sorry, I just wanted to add something here, which was a very good point that Sister Maaria made about the lack of data. Now, the lack of data, there's two methods of looking at this. One, it is a governmental responsibility, undeniably, that if they were providing us with this data, if they allowed us to investigate what was happening in our communities, it would, of course, help us. The other way of looking at this is our own responsibility, and this is, shall we say, one of my bugbears, one of the things which I get very passionate about, which is that our Muslim civil organizations, they were primarily built 30, 40, 50 years ago. They were built they were built to help immigrants remember, shall we say, their back homes, right? So they would replicate those institutions. So, for example, masajid, alhamdulillah, they're getting better. But when we go to like a mosque in the subcontinent, in the Middle East, a lot of the time I'm very baffled, because they're effectively just prayer rooms. That's all they are. And this is what our mosques were like. And the reason this matters is because a lot of our funding went towards those mosques. A lot of our funding, and this is also very crucial, and alhamdulillah, like organizations like Islamic Relief and all of the international humanitarian organizations, I have worked for one myself, as alhamdulillah, they do vital work. But that money is effectively an export. We're exporting that money to what we feel are urgent needs abroad.
Yes.
And certainly, providing water and wells and food for people outside is vital. But what that also does is it starves Muslim civil organizations of funding. So one of the reasons we don't have data is because we hardly have any Muslim think tanks. Alhamdulillah, there's some little pockets of work happening. But if we were to look at their funding, it would be hardly anything. When we look at Muslim Youth Helpline, Islamic Relief, alhamdulillah, the biggest Muslim charity, they do vital work. They get £130 million of funding per year. We get Muslim Youth Helpline, to be frank, we get £130,000. That's it.
That's nothing.
Right?
That's nothing compared to the nature of the work that you guys do and the need. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's actually sad.
Well, see, this is the thing, right? So Islamic Relief is literally 1,000 times bigger than us. And I did the maths on this before I came on, that if there's effectively 1.5 million people under the age of 30, 1.5 million, right? Our level of funding is effectively 7p per person. That's it. Right? So that is the reason, like Muslim Youth Helpline, alhamdulillah, we do so much work, but there's only so much we can do. If, for example, if we had more funding, then we would be able to investigate these more. We would be able to do broader surveys. This would help invigorate as well Muslim civil society, so we could see the issues. And we know we have issues, but how can we talk about issues when we don't even have the funding to be able to quote stats? And we live in a data-driven age. Like a lot of the things I'm talking about now, I'm trying to derive data from other sources, because we don't have Muslim specific sources. So we do have that responsibility, I would say, that alhamdulillah, our forefathers, shall we say, they created those civil societies, and they're very vital. But let us travel back in time a bit. Those were primarily people. Let's say if we go back to the 70s and 80s, the 60s, those were primarily actually young people. Those were people under 40. Those people setting up those mosques and those civil organizations, they were actually in their 20s and 30s. But they had something we don't. They didn't have their parents telling them what to do. Because their parents were in the subcontinent. Their parents were in the Middle East. So they came to this country, and it was effectively a virgin country. And when you come as an immigrant, as a first generation immigrant, the world is your oyster. You can do what you want. You have that power, right? And it's beautiful. Now, if we were to start again from ground zero, there would be no Muslim organizations, and we build again. Where would our areas of focus be? And I'm sure there would be a space for Islamic relief, but I would suspect that there would be a broader area for Muslim mental health concerns.
Yes.
Because young people, this is what they want. This is what they need. Yeah. Alhamdulillah, we are the most emotionally literate generation probably in history. That is why alhamdulillah, like TV shows like yourself can exist now, because we have that platform.
Yeah.
But now we have to start to really think about how we help the mental health of young people, because we have this situation where we're effectively exporting our surplus funds, alhamdulillah, charity abroad, and so it starves our organizations. And just to add on a final point, again, this comes back from some of the facts which I was pulling up before I came online, that the median age of the broader UK population is around 41, right? There's it doesn't actually come on TV, but there is some white in my beard. So I am getting older, right? I am getting older, right? I am still younger than the median age of this country. But for Muslims, young Muslims, the median age is only around 26 or 27 years old. That's it. That means once you're 28, you're effectively, shall we say, a Buddha. You're in the older part of the age group. More than half the Muslims are younger than you, right? Yeah. So we have 75,000 Muslims every year turning 18. And they are faced, that's a big number, and they are faced with the civil society, the organizations we have created. Now we have to ask ourselves, those 75,000 people turning 18 every year, are those services in place to help them? And I think we know the answer to that. It's no. Organizations like MYH, the other Muslim mental health organizations which you interview, we are all there and we're ready, but we really need to grow to be able to service these people's needs, because they need help, they need support. How are they going to get that help and support if we don't offer it to them? Like Sister Maaria was talking about faith-based support, culture-based support. That is needed, because that makes people feel that they are listened to. And in mental health, that's very important. If someone doesn't understand your background and you feel you have to justify living in a multi-generational household, you feel like you have to explain every little aspect of your cultural identity, and it's almost like you're feeling judged before you've even had that opportunity to have a conversation. That is that is very difficult. That is very difficult. And so we have this situation where the government as a whole is pumping more money towards mental health, but is it pumping money towards our mental health concerns and needs?
That's a very important point that you have highlighted, that even when we look at research-based evidence out there in regards to mental health of young people, it's quite generic. It's not specific to Muslims. And the struggles and the daily challenges that Muslim youth face in the UK or Europe or any other Western country, it's slightly different to what somebody from another faith background or culture may be experiencing. So, in order to
Yes.
cater their needs specifically, like you said, we need more funding so that these
Mm-hmm.
organizations can be better equipped to offer those services. And yes, there
Yeah.
is this trend and this obsession with supporting humanitarian aid organizations that provide,
Mm.
for example, food packs or dig a water well. I know our community loves doing that kind of work. If you're raising funds, for example, some mental health related cause, and on the other hand, you have the option of constructing a bore well or a water well, most people will go towards that water project. How
Mm-hmm.
many people actually give charity towards causes like these? That's another key question we need to ask ourselves. That why do we undermine mental health in general? Why is it that we
Mm.
do look after our body, but when it comes to our mind, we are so ignorant? We choose to be ignorant. We choose to
Yes.
not pay attention, and especially young people growing up in this environment, in this society, where, say, for example, their parents or grandparents were immigrants. Their challenges were different, but the challenges that are being faced by people under the age of 18 are totally different, especially with this global pandemic where most people were spending time inside their house. Like Sister Maria mentioned, children were uncertain in regards to their future, whether they'll be giving exams or they won't be giving exams. So these are new, unique challenges. These are like unprecedented times. And these young
Mm.
people need support and the right kind of support. And
Mm.
sometimes you can't speak with your family members. You can't speak to your parents about certain issues, certain things that are bothering you. And
Mm.
organizations like Muslim Youth Helpline, they are kind of a safe space for these young people.
Yes.
And you mentioned about young people thinking of suicide or ending their lives. This is a very serious matter. Um, I would like to ask you here, what you think are the leading factors, what causes mental health difficulties or suicidal ideation in young people?
That is a very difficult question to ask. It's philosophical in nature, really, isn't it? But the fact is, when we're dealing with people who are feeling suicidal, right? This is how I picture it. That there's many ways of looking at it, but effectively, um, there are, if you imagine there's some scales, right, and you have all of the benefits of continuing to live, and then you have all of the, shall we say, dare I say, the disbenefits. And what happens, unfortunately, is that people experiencing a loss of hope, that is what causes and leads to suicidal ideation. That is what, heaven forbid it happens, but that is what leads to loss of life. So people lose the grounds for living, and the grounds where they feel, life is not worth living. That,
Mm,
but the fact is that this is, a lot of the time this happens, it is very fleeting. And sorry to be frank, but this is what happens, that sometimes you hear about people who tried to commit suicide and they failed, and a lot of the time
yes.
they say, as soon as I did this action, I regretted it, because
Mm,
that hope I felt that hope again, and I wanted to live.
yeah.
That does happen, and this is where MYH's intervention is so crucial, because we want we want to be able to say to young people, there is hope. Just
Yeah.
someone listening to you and just saying, I understand, I am here for you. Here are some
Yeah.
other methods that you can help. That helps
Yeah.
to take people down a different path. And that is what we need to be able to do. And I hear about cases all the time, and because it's sensitive, of course, we can't go into
Of
specific
course.
reasons
Yeah. Yeah.
why people lost their life, but we have to be there for them. So
It's
yeah.
just to get an understanding of what drives a person to that stage, so that parents who are completely oblivious to what's happening in the life of their child or adolescent, teenager that they have.
Mm-hmm.
What advice we can give to parents? What are the warning signs, for example, that parents should look out for to figure out if their child needs help? Maybe the child doesn't feel comfortable, or the child is fearful of speaking about anything that the child has experienced, whether it's, say, for example, molestation, abuse, bullying, harassment. There are numerous problems that a child or a young person can come across, but the parents may not be aware.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. There are no easy answers here, but it starts from even before that question is raised. It's about creating a non-judgmental, non-evaluative household where a
Mm,
parent has an open relationship with their child. That
definitely.
when a young person tells us something, we shouldn't mock them or condescend them or like laugh at them. Like if they say, oh, like a 6-year-old is saying, oh, look, I have a girlfriend, for example, like which sounds very silly. And it's very easy,
Yeah,
like culturally, for us to say, oh, astaghfirullah, this is terrible.
yeah, yeah,
This shouldn't happen. And then to give them the speech. And what that actually does is that young child then actually learns to filter themselves. So they no longer
yes.
speak to the parent. So when the
Mm,
actual issues start arising, when they're 13, 14, 15, it's almost too late. Like we
yeah,
hear, for example, about Shayukh, Islamic scholars being
yes.
asked by parents to intervene in the cases of their children.
Mm,
And
yeah,
a lot of the time, the sheikh just has to be honest and say, "This is too late. This person is an
yeah,
adult now.
yeah,
They've made their
yeah.
choice. Whatever that choice might be.
Mm,
Where were you when they were growing up? And this is what we
yes.
have to do. Like, there is, I will just give a shout out to another Muslim organization here. There's an organization called Approachable Parenting in Birmingham,
Yes.
and what?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So what they do very specifically is they want to create an atmosphere where children and parents can talk to one another openly. And so that is a responsibility of parents as well. It's not just of young people, but parents have to create that beautiful household of sharing and nurturing and care and caring to
Yes.
allow that
Yeah.
to happen.
Yeah.
So inshallah that doesn't. And I would say as well for parents as well to be kind to themselves as well. That
Yeah.
if you even ask this question, if you even
Hmm.
ask this question of how I can be a better parent, Alhamdulillah,
Yeah.
you're 90% of the way there. Because inshallah then you are creating that atmosphere for your young person to grow up. A lot of the
Yeah.
people that Muslim Youth Helpline and the reason why we have to exist is because that support is unavailable or is just not there. Like for example, if someone is dealing with abuse in the
Yes.
family, who are they going to call? It's
Mm.
very difficult to turn to someone else because that person is going to know you for the rest of your life. Even if you think that they will be there to support you, an organization like MYH is a very
Yeah.
useful gateway just to give a little bit of respite so that person can say, look, these are my issues. How can I solve them in a way? Like how can I move towards resolving this? And then inshallah
Yes.
MYH can offer advice and pathways. Ultimately, we all have that little bit of personal responsibility whether we choose to enact them, but it gives them that level of support that is
Hmm.
needed from outside of the family. And then inshallah, once they're more, shall we say, on the level and they're feeling better, then again, then they can start to access their existing channels of support.
So, in a nutshell, if I
Mhm.
may ask, what does Muslim Youth Helpline offers to young people apart from a support service that actively listens to their problems or concerns and research?
Mm.
That's another thing you pointed out. What else is there? I mean,
that
how does it differ from another Muslim organization?
Okay, now that's a very good question. I think that when you're dealing with charity work, that it is not a competition. We work
Of course.
in collaboration with everyone else. So, for example, you have Muslim women's specific helplines. You have I can never pronounce it, but Bernardo's. They do like a
Yes.
Bolo helpline for Asians, right? And we have all of these organizations who are all assisting. But what Muslim Youth Helpline has is that it gives people, shall we say, a further avenue of support. So if they go onto our website, they can find it via WhatsApp, via chat, via text, via phone call, however they feel able to contact us, that they are able to. And yes, we do offer, shall we say, specific signposts, but more than anything, and the reason why our organizations are important is it just gives people that level of support, that knowing it is there. Like, alhamdulillah, when I was growing up, I'm just speaking from personal experience, when I was growing up, I never had to call Childline, but it was useful to know that Childline existed, right? It was helpful to say, okay, if something tragic happens in my home and I need to call someone, Childline is there for me. And that is exactly what an organization like Muslim Youth Helpline does. Inshallah, most young people will never need to use our services. But it's so helpful and important for them to know that these organizations exist, and that if in a moment of crisis, that we are there to help them.
What about people who may not speak English as their first language? Do you offer bilingual services, like callers who are bilingual?
I'm not actually sure on that.
Maybe people can have a look at the website.
Yeah, I know. I'll have to check on that. I don't know if Sister Maaria is still on the line, but inshallah, I will. As a new member, I'm not sure, but I will check that with my colleagues. But I know that primarily coming from ethnic backgrounds, that all of us, most of us, can speak a couple of languages, so that service is available. I certainly know. I mean, my Urdu is terrible, but I certainly know. Like when I was in the ambulance service, that we would switch to whatever language was comfortable for that person. And certainly if someone calls in, I know we have Arabic speakers, we have Urdu speakers, Punjabi speakers. If someone calls in and they're seeking support, inshallah, I'm sure that there'd be ways that we could help them.
Inshallah. Because we only have 4 minutes left, so if there's any final message you would like to give to our audience.
Yeah. Okay. So very quickly then, I just want to say that humanitarian aid and all of that, I just want to confirm that is very important. That what I'm thinking about, and this is what Muslim Youth Helpline really does, is we're not offering necessarily support to a massive cross-section. What we really do is we offer support which helps change individuals' lives in this country. So, and that is what mental health wellness is about, really. That when you can intervene and help someone, you can effectively change their lives for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And what I would like, and I think what all of us would like, is a strong, robust British Muslim community which can look after our own. That when people need zakat, that we can provide them with zakat. When people need mental health, we can provide them with mental health. When people even need, shall we say, like business support, that there'll be Muslim organizations which can say, okay, look, this is how the best way to form a business. And if we create a really robust British Muslim civil society, that will give us the strength to not only to be an asset to the broader British community, and so people will go, wow, these are Muslims. This is actually how, when we were minorities in places like Indonesia and in India and in East Africa, this is how people came to Islam, because we were so robust. And inshallah, we can do that again here.
Definitely. Thank you so much for the, sorry to interrupt, but we have run out of time, unfortunately. But thank you so much for coming today and sharing this insightful conversation and telling our viewers about Muslim Youth Helpline. We'll take your leave, inshallah. We'll come up with another episode of Aage next Saturday. Till then, look after your mental health. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.